Good evening, Rowan. It's the 26th of September 2016 and it's about 1 AM. And obviously I'm making you my usual video at the end of the weekend to reassure you I haven't been seducing any priests, because I'm saving myself for my beloved, who I'm going to be with as soon as you're in prison. I can't wait. It's going to be fantastic. Anyway, I thought we could continue our little chat this evening about the bizarre talk, and your talks are getting increasingly bizarre as time goes on. And you were talking supposedly about the ethics of global relationship. This was at St Martin in the Fields in Trafalgar Square in London on the 19th of September 2016, when I was going to come and arrest you, and I even had the ticket. But unfortunately I wasn't well enough, so but that doesn't mean I'm not going to come and arrest you in the future, so you still have to be alert. Anyway, as a result of this, you thought I was actually going to be in the audience that evening, and this is relevant to the things I'm going to be talking about in your lecture. So you thought I was actually there in the audience, and you were talking to me, and I've demonstrated that in the last video as well, while you were talking about making choices, and you seem to have decided that I didn't want a passive role in an S&M relationship, that I wanted an active role. So basically, you were saying, as I went over in the last video at the beginning of the lecture, that I actually have a choice whether you force sex on me or not. Because you seem not to have realised that I chose in July 1994, and then I moved on. I chose not to have sex with you. I didn't want you. I've chosen already. But that was obviously the wrong choice, because you keep trying to force me to make another choice that you think is the right choice. So anyway, this evening, you use a couple of strategies that you've used plenty of times before, and I'm going to come on to that. But the first thing I want to say, and I'm going to show some video clips to demonstrate this. Now, last August and September, you referred to a song by the Sisters of Mercy. You know I'm familiar with that band, and First, Last and Always. First and Last and Always is a song by the Sisters of Mercy. I've mentioned this in 2 videos before, and you referred to this back about August and September time last year, and I've mentioned this before, but the relevant lyrics, this is the chorus of the song, first and last and always till the end of time, first and last and always mine. So you do use these techniques of referring to things you know that I'm familiar with, to tell me how you view the situation, shall we say. Because as I've said before, you live in a fantasy world, and I've told you about 1,000 times now, I'm not yours, I'm absolutely nothing to do with you, and it's all in your head, you've made it up, it's a fantasy, it's not real. So you actually use the same technique again in the material I'm going to be talking about. Now, I recently made a video about a poetry programme where you were talking about the poems of Jack Clemmo, and Roger McGough was presenting this programme on BBC Radio 4. And I said that you were alluding to sex in one of the things that you said, and I showed what you said. I'm going to show this again later on in the video, and I also showed a clip of video from a song by Sash called Raindrops and Encore Fois. Sash is a DJ and remixes songs and merges different songs together. So this was a merging of 2 songs. Raindrops was one song, and Encore Fois was another song. So I showed a video clip of this, but I actually removed the original soundtrack and replaced it with another soundtrack because I wanted to edit the video so it showed the bits that illustrated the points I was making, and also the lyrics of the song didn't really fit in with that, so that's why I changed the soundtrack. But you're referring to this song tonight, and you've obviously looked at it, and you know what the lyrics are, because some of the things that you say in this lecture, also believing that I'm in the audience there, I'm going to show you that you're actually using lyrics from this song. You've looked at the original song and found the lyrics. So I'm just going to read some lyrics from this song, first of all, before I go on to talk about it, and then I'll show the clips of the song later on. And the clip of you talking about Jack Clemmo and what I'd done originally to illustrate my point. So here's a few of the lyrics from this song, Raindrops. Feels so lonely, won't you show me where I need to be? And then a bit further on, you bring me alive, you reach me somewhere deep within, you make my body come alive. I whisper things you never knew, I can't believe that tonight I'm here with you. You make my body come alive. So those are some of the relevant lyrics. There are some more, but I won't go on forever about it. So I'm now going to move on to talking about what you said in this clip I'm going to show. So you say, the ethics of global relationship is not about constructing a system of universal morality. So you don't want a system of universal morality. I mean, even as a Christian you don't, even though appropriate morality is being revealed to us and we have it in scripture and tradition. You don't want any universal morality. And also, I've come to the conclusion that the way that you talk about global relationship, you're not actually talking about the globe as in terms of the earth. What you're trying to do is to say that people can't have exclusive personal relationships, that if you decide to have sex with one person, like I'm going to be doing with my beloved as soon as you're in jail, so I'm not allowed to decide to have sex with another man if I've decided not to have sex with you. And this is what you're referring to in terms of global relationship. This is what this term global relationship means in this context that you're talking here. So I'm going to go on and say what you said. The ethics of global relationship is not about constructing a system of universal morality. It's first and foremost recognising a summons to be life givers, to be to others the surprising strangers who bring them alive. Now let me refer to this song again. You bring me alive, you reach me somewhere deep within, you make my body come alive. So then you go on to say, and one of the implications of that is that we must expect to be brought alive by surprising strangers. So I suppose you're the surprising stranger who's going to bring me alive, and you can't believe that tonight you're here with me, because you thought I was there, didn't you? So you go on to say, as Jesus' story also suggests, you're talking about the parable of the Good Samaritan, which I read out in my last video. A great deal of our habitual life ignores this. We imagine that life is simply something that we've got, and ideally that we're not obliged to share. Well, to be honest, we're not obliged to share it, and I'm certainly not obliged to share anything of me with you, and particularly not my vagina, so just stop thinking about it. You're totally mad. We will find many reasons for retaining our suspicion of the stranger. Well, yes, there are many reasons for retaining suspicion of you, like you've been trying to force me to have sex with you for nearly 25 years. So I'm quite suspicious. And also the fact that you're an Illuminati shill and you're working to depopulate the earth and enslave all the rest of the people who are in it. So I am quite suspicious of you for very good reasons. So you say, we may even, like the priest and the Levite in the story, find a way of treating the obvious neighbour, the fellow Jew, by the side of the road, as a stranger. Well, if you're regarding me as a fellow anything, I mean, I'm a fellow human being, but that's as far as it goes. I'm not a fellow anything with you. And I have actually left the Church of England. I'd like to remind you, and I won't be going back. I don't care what happens. So you then say, part of the force of the parable is that in Jesus' time, the three classifications of God's people were priests, Levites, and Israelites, and there they all are in the story. So you emphasise force here. And you talk about priests, Levites and Israelites. I hope you're not identifying yourself with the priest in the story, because as I've said, you should be identifying yourself with the robbers. And in any case, you're not a real priest, you're completely null and utterly void. As well as all your other afflictions. So you go on to say, and the priest and the Levite don't want to recognise the Israelite whom they treat as a stranger, perhaps a polluting dead body, perhaps some embarrassing presence, who'll be a drag on them, their purity and their security. So, well, you are certainly a polluting influence. You're a corrupting influence. You're trying to corrupt me by referring to me as Rahab. Or associating me. Trying to get myself, me to associate myself with Rahab the prostitute, who was going to perish unless she welcomed the spies. And you're one of the spies, aren't you? Because you work for MI6. And also this term purity here, I mean, it meant a different thing in this gospel story, that there are Jewish laws of ritual purity, and the priest couldn't have performed his offices in the temple if he'd been ritually impure, such as by touching a dead body. But in Christianity, purity actually refers to sexual purity, usually. So you think... you think I shouldn't be rejecting you just because you'll be a drag on me, my purity and my security. Well, you are a drag on me. You're a drag on me in every way imaginable. And you're the one who's embarrassed. You've been trying to embarrass me for years, haven't you? You've done a lot of horrible things to try and crush me and make me feel alienated and that kind of thing. But you're the one who's embarrassed now, because I've drawn attention to the fact that you're absolutely obsessed with sex. And obviously also you work for MI6 and you're a Satanist. But after you went round the whole globe virtually telling everybody I was... a delinquent sex maniac and fantasist and a repressed lesbian, and then it turns out that you're a delinquent sex maniac and fantasist, and I wouldn't even be surprised if you were a repressed lesbian, to be honest. You've lied about everything else. So then you say, so global relationship is no bland matter. You emphasise bland, I don't really know why. Not a question of universal benevolence. You're not talking about your astrophysical clergy friend there again, are you? Not a question of saying the whole world is my friend. Global relationship means the willingness to be a surprising stranger and to be surprised by strangers, and in that, to let neighbourliness come alive. So we're back with this song again, aren't we? So you're talking about the willingness to be a surprising stranger, to be surprised. And so the song says, feel so lonely, won't you show me? where I need to be. And then you say, and in that to let neighbourliness come alive, and you emphasise come. And here it says, you bring me alive, you reach me somewhere deep within, you make my body come alive. So, you're so hilarious. I was at home laid in bed with my cat anyway, I didn't feel well, so it was a total waste of time, you doing that. So you then go on to say, Dietrich Bonhoeffer, in the years leading up to the Second World War, was beginning to work on Christian ethics, and we still have the drafts that he prepared before he was finally imprisoned by the Nazi regime and executed. And Bonhoeffer's work in ethics is an attempt to turn on its head, you emphasise that, most of the ways in which Christians are used to doing ethics. Well, by the time, I don't even know if this is true, I don't know anything about Bonhoeffer, but you do lie about absolutely everything else, so I'd hardly be surprised if he wasn't doing anything of the sort anyway. And probably he wasn't trying to turn Christian ethics on its head anyway. Most people, when they complain about Christian ethics, they think that people don't practice them enough. Not that they practice them too much. So who knows if he was even doing that anyway. And since Christian ethics have been around for kind of about 2,000 years by the time of Bonhoeffer, well, what new insight would he have into that, really, that would be so revolutionary it would turn it all on its head? Anyone who's claiming that they can do that and still be faithful to Christian teaching and scripture is lying or insane. So you then say, I've got my pages muddled up now. And he does it by saying that Christian ethics, and you cough once there, I'm sure that's very meaningful, the more you clear your throat, is essentially about standing where Jesus stands and taking responsibility with him for representing, speaking for the world. That's where ethics begins. It begins in the decision to speak on behalf of, to stand in for, and to stand in with any and every human situation. So you're deliberately using bad grammar here to speak on behalf of, to stand in for, and to stand in with. And you're also using the rule of three. So you're being very clear that you're communicating directly with me by using these things that you know I'm going to notice. So you say, now, of course, says Bonhoeffer, this doesn't mean that each one of us carries an infinite responsibility. We're not, as a matter of fact, God. But each one of us carries a responsibility which is going to come alive in ways we cannot predict. Well, I can predict that you're not going to be doing any coming alive with me. I mean, I've offered to kick you in the balls because I know you're into S&M, but only in a public place and if you keep all your clothes on. But I will dress up, you know, in fancy dress, you know, whatever you're fantasising about, so long as it, you know, it's quite a lot of clothing. So just let me know what you're fantasising about me wearing when I kick you in the balls, and I'll be happy to oblige. I'll even pay my own bus fare, I'm not asking for anything. I'm really, really keen to kick you in the balls, and since you're into S&M, it's win-win, as I've said. So then you say, and one of the things that Bonhoeffer says most emphatically and clearly in the surviving fragments of what would have been an extraordinary book on ethics, well, it certainly would have been extraordinary if it turned Christian ethics on its head, is that our greatest mistake is to try to spell out in advance who we're responsible for. In other words, to answer the question, who is my neighbour, neatly and conclusively, so that we don't have to be bothered by the people we hadn't planned for. Well, you're supposed to be talking about the Good Samaritan here. So the Samaritan came along and he hadn't planned for meeting somebody who'd been beaten up by a robber and left for dead. So what did he do? He paid the innkeeper to look after him, and then he carried on his journey. So it's not really quite the same thing as the fact that I hadn't planned, when I was thinking about ordination in the church in Wales, I hadn't planned for the bishop trying to screw me and then hounding me around the country for nearly 25 years. Just because he couldn't say no for an answer. So it's not quite the same thing really, is it? You know, because if I'd found you slumped at the side of the road, beaten up and all this kind of thing, and I thought you were dead, I'd have checked if you were dead or not, and I'd have phoned an ambulance. So I would have taken care of you in that sense. But that's not what happened, is it? In fact, I didn't find you beaten up. You've been beating me up all these years, and every time I've got back up again myself or with someone else's help, you've battered me back down again. So this isn't the kind of thing that the Good Samaritan was talking about. And even if Bonhoeffer was talking about this at all, I'm quite sure this isn't what he was talking about either. So you say, for Bonhoeffer, universal responsibility is a matter of readiness, moment by moment, to stand in for and to stand with whatever human neighbour is around. So you're saying this when you think I'm in the audience, whatever human neighbour is around. And what you're saying is that you shouldn't already have a firm belief system, a firm system of ethics. You should just react individually, like without any schema, to each thing that comes along. So that's kind of the way somebody with a personality disorder would look at things, really, just reacting to every situation without any great, how can I put it, consistency, I suppose, really, but really reacting in a very rigid way, and the same triggers create the same response all the time. But it's not a thought out response, it's an emotional or psychological response. And also, someone who's traumatised has their schemas shattered. So a traumatised person, this is one of the reasons why trauma leads to personality disorder, because it shatters schemas. The world's no longer a safe place. Everything I've believed up until now isn't true about people helping me or things being safe or whatever the problem is that you've faced. And so you're talking about the whole of life for everybody, as if it ought to be. They ought to be acting in the way that only a very traumatised person with a fragmented personality would think and act. So you then say, and that, says Bonhoeffer, is the heart of the being and the logic of the church. The church does, as a matter of fact, he says, take up a bit of room in the world. You can't just be an invisible church. Sooner or later people will spot it. But the space the church takes up in the world is the space that it holds and occupies on behalf of everybody. I think you're talking astrophysically again, aren't you? So you say, that's to say, the church is not there to defend its territory. So you're objecting once again to the fact that I'm defending my vagina as my territory, and I decide who, if anybody, has access to it. And you certainly don't. And so you tried throwing a tantrum the week before when you were accusing me of being hateful just because I'd made a couple of videos on YouTube, drawing attention to the fact that you've got a proclivity for S&M. So you're trying once again to be manipulative, and you've always done this because there's always something wrong with the people who won't give you what you want, because, as I've said many times before, this is how morality and virtue is defined in your world. people giving you what you want are virtuous, upright, moral, holy people, and people refusing to give you what you want are wicked, sinful, extreme right wing, anti Semitic, everything else you can think of. Repressed lesbians, all this kind of thing. So whoever doesn't give you what you want is defective in some way, and you only change the labels that you're slapping on the person. And at the moment, it's me you're slapping these labels on simply because I won't give you what you want. So this is just another instance of you acting out. Oh, mummy won't give me what I want. She's just so mean. So then you say, so that's to say the church is not there to defend its territory. Here's the religious bit, or here's the Christian bit, here's the ethical bit. I don't know who's thinking like that anyway. I'm not thinking like that. The church occupies space, so as to say we will guarantee this for everybody. Well, it doesn't occupy space to guarantee my vagina for everybody, Rowan, and I've refused you. So just get over it, you brain-dead moron. You're making yourself look even worse than you already do. And you make this even worse now. The church occupies space so as to say we will guarantee this for everyone. We will try to keep open here the promise of a solidarity without any advance restriction. You're absolutely insane. You're a lunatic. You're a sexual predator and you're a stalker. And you haven't even got the balls to stalk me in person generally. You were using other people to do it for decades. So you then go on to say, and it's in that way, according to Bonhoeffer, that the church shows what and who Jesus is. So is this, are you referring to this song again? Here, feel so lonely, won't you show me where I need to be? That the church shows what and who Jesus is. For him, this is Bonhoeffer, I think, the theology of global relationships. This means you're not allowed exclusive relationships, like just the one with your wife or husband or with your family. You have to make everything available that you would make available to your partner, to everybody. That explains why you're such a philanderer. You think you're being generous, don't you? For him, the theology of global relationship began with a recognition that in Jesus Christ, God stands in for and stands with any and every human person. That's what the life of Jesus and the death of Jesus are all about. Well, this is fantastic, isn't it? So, the life and death of Jesus, all that's about is making myself sexually available to you. Well, that's amazing. Just think, in all these years, I just never realised. So you then say, if we are to live with him in his neighbourhood, in his spirit, in his power, that's where we stand, and that's what we seek to realise. So if Bonhoeffer is right, and if my hearing of this parable is right, it isn't, by the way, the ethic of global relationship is an ethic to do with creating relationship. Well, no, it isn't. Not, and certainly not in relation to the parable of the Good Samaritan, because as I've said, the Samaritan didn't even get into a relationship with the man. He just paid the innkeeper to look after him. He continued on his journey, and he said, whatever you spend more than this, I'll pay you when I get back. And there was no ongoing relationship, as far as I know. Maybe the man got better and left before the Samaritan got back. So it's got nothing at all to do with creating relationship, this parable. Do you know, even if I were going to make something up, as insane that you said, I wouldn't think of anything as insane as the things that you actually do, sir. You couldn't make this up. So you say, I've nearly finished now. With the decision, wherever we are, in whatever human situation, to make a bond, to stand with, and as Bonhoeffer says, and it's a challenging phrase, to stand in for, potentially to stand in for the other, that is to take what's coming to them, to lift their burden on their behalf, creating relationships which rest upon a recognition that no one of us is who he or she is alone. So you're now using another strategy that you've used before as well, and I'm going to show a clip to illustrate this later on as well, that you've said this several times in relation to Dostoevsky, talking about a character in one of his novels accepting the blame for a crime that he hadn't committed. And you started this technique about 18 months ago. It was his offering in an unjust world to take responsibility for some murder that he hadn't committed, this character in Dostoevsky's novel. But I'm going to play that clip later on anyway. So you just keep using the same strategies over and over again, which is what I've said you do. In fact, you've got very few strategies and you're going through them more rapidly now as you're getting more stressed. And you can't learn, because you're a psychopath, that this isn't going to have the effect you want. You would have learnt that a long time ago now. I'm never going to give you what you want. And there's no point keep repeating the same thing over and over again, because in your worldview I'm making incorrect decisions, not giving you what you want, and this is why you've perpetrated this systematic hate campaign against me for decades, in order to force me to make the correct decision and give you what you want. The correct decision as you see it, because I have to act in accordance with the identity I have in your fantasy world, rather than anything to do with who I really am. So you say that no one of us is who he or she is alone. Well, I am who I am alone, Rowan, and I am who I am, even if you didn't exist. You're absolutely nothing to me, you're nothing to do with me, and you never will be. So you say no one of us exists in a vacuum or as an atom. No one of us comes into being full-grown, self-sufficient. Well, that's true, but I didn't even know you until I was 23, so I was already an adult when I met you, so I didn't really need you at all to tell me who I was, did I? Even overlooking the fact that you're a complete psychopath and you just tried to screw me. So, you know, I had parents and other family and friends and, you know, teachers in school and a lot of other people I came across a long time, and I'd also been working before I met you as well, and studying in university. So all of these things I'd experienced, and people who helped me grow into who I am or who I was before I even clapped eyes on you or even knew you existed. So you can't come into someone's life at a late stage and assume that you're essential to them anyway. You know, when someone's an adult, he or she can normally take care of him or herself. So you then say our human life is constantly receiving who we are from those around us, and in turn giving our life that they may be alive. So you're referring to this song again, aren't you? You bring me alive, you reach me somewhere deep within, you make my body come alive. So you wanted me to be giving my life so that you may be alive. So you say it may sound very advanced and spiritual and even mystical. Well, it doesn't. It just sounds like complete insanity and you trying to get your leg over again to save your skin. It's just you practicing all the same psychopathic manipulative strategies that you use. The very few strategies you've got actually for trying to manipulate other people into giving you what you want. So it doesn't sound advanced and spiritual and even mystical. It sounds like you're a nutcase. But it's the basic fact of our language, our interaction, the gesture with which parent, I've lost my other page now again, and child communicate. That's where it all begins, as we begin to be who we are because we are related. Well, we're not related, and we're back in this song again. Feel so lonely, won't you show me where I need to be? And then you say, and of course, in our human lives, we're related. I'm on the last paragraph now. Always and already in ways we never chose and never planned. Well, I certainly never chose and never planned to have the bishop trying to screw me. And particularly when he was already married to someone else who was actually in the house briefly at the same point in time as well. We are embarrassingly bound up, you're on S&M again, with the lives of everybody around us. We'd rather not be. You think I'm there in the room when you're talking about this as well. It would be good if we could trace our pedigree to some independent source not infected by the embarrassing failures of the human race at large. Well, I don't need a pedigree. I'm not responsible for the failures of the human race at large. I'm not responsible for people of my own race or gender or anything like that. I'm only responsible for me. Just as we'd all like in the church to be independent of the failures of the church at large. Well, you're collectivising failure in the church, aren't you? Because you're the biggest failure in the church that I've ever encountered. You're a complete and utter fraud. You're an infiltrator. You're not even a Christian. You're a Luciferian. And so this is, you've used this strategy before as well, when you were also trying to manipulate me to take the blame for things that you've done and things I haven't done and things that David Pete did. When you're saying, you know, we're all part of the system where these unfortunate things happen. This is the typical abnegation of personal responsibility that you find nearly always in people with personality disorder. You won't take any responsibility for your own actions at all. And I made a video about all the highly developed strategies that you've got for evading criticism. That was your birthday video, I think. And you share a birthday with Donald Trump, which obviously you'll be quite happy about. In fact, I think it was the happy anniversary video where I was celebrating the anniversary of you throwing me out of St Michael's Church in Headingley on the 23rd of May 2004, and I asked you if it worked and if you'd got what you wanted. So that was 12 years ago, and you still haven't learned, even after nearly 25 years, that I'm not going to give you what you want. Not now, not ever. So you say, we'd like to be... We'd like to be independent of the church's failures. And then you say, but we're bound in already. So you're on S&M again. And when we decide to be a neighbour, when we decide to embark on a style of life that gives life, we're not in fact just doing something in a vacuum. We are recognising and acting out the truth that is deepest in us. When I decide to be a neighbour, when I decide to be the one who gives life, I decide to be what I most deeply am. I recognise and enter into that deep exchange by which human beings constantly make one another human. So by effectively trying to rape me, you're saying that's what makes me human, are you? having a creepy old pervert force himself on me, by which human beings constantly make one another human. This is entering into that deep exchange. You know, there's another part of this song that I didn't write down that says, "You reach me deep inside" as well. So I've played some clips from the song. I couldn't play as much as I wanted to because of copyright laws. But anyway, I've gone on for quite a long time now, so I will leave it there. But I will be turning up to arrest you, don't worry. So be alert. And obviously, I want to go to sleep as soon as possible because it's already quite late. Because I want to be dreaming about my beloved all night long once again. Because we're going to be together in each other's arms the moment the door slams shut behind you. So you can stick that in your pipe and smoke it. Hasta la próxima.
The ethics of global relationship is not about constructing a system of universal morality. It's first and foremost recognizing a summons to be life givers, to be to others the surprising strangers who bring them alive. And one of the implications of that is that we must expect to be brought alive by surprising strangers. As Jesus' story also suggests, a great deal of our habitual life ignores this. We imagine that life is simply something we've got, and ideally that we're not obliged to share. We will find many reasons for retaining our suspicion of the stranger. We may even, like the priest and the Levite in the story, find a way of treating the obvious neighbour, the fellow Jew by the side of the road, as a stranger. Part of the force of the parable is that in Jesus' time, the three classifications of God's people were priests, Levites, and Israelites. And there they all are in the story. And the priest and the Levite don't want to recognize the Israelite, whom they treat as a stranger, perhaps a polluting dead body, perhaps some embarrassing presence who will be a drag on them, their purity and their security. So, global relationship is no bland matter, not a question of universal benevolence, not a question of saying the whole world is my friend. Global relationship means the willingness to be a surprising stranger and to be surprised by strangers, and in that to let neighbourliness come alive. Dietrich Bonhoeffer, in the years leading up to the Second World War, was beginning to work on Christian ethics. And we still have the drafts that he prepared before he was finally imprisoned by the Nazi regime and executed. And Bonhoeffer's work on ethics is an attempt to turn on its head most of the ways in which Christians are used to doing ethics. And he does it by saying that Christian ethics is essentially about standing where Jesus stands and taking responsibility with him for representing, speaking for the world. That's where ethics begins. It begins in the decision to speak on behalf of, to stand in for, and to stand in with any and every human situation. Now, of course, says Bonhoeffer, this doesn't mean that each one of us carries an infinite responsibility. We're not, as a matter of fact, God. But each one of us carries a responsibility which is going to come alive in ways we cannot predict. And one of the things that Bonhoeffer says most emphatically and clearly in the surviving fragments of what would have been an extraordinary book on ethics is that our greatest mistake is to try to spell out in advance who we're responsible for. In other words, to answer the question, who is my neighbour, neatly and conclusively, so that we don't have to be bothered by the people we hadn't planned for. For Bonhoeffer, universal responsibility is a matter of readiness, moment by moment, to stand in for and to stand with whatever human neighbour is around. And that, says Bonhoeffer, is the heart of the being and the logic of the Church. The Church does, as a matter of fact, he says, take up a bit of room in the world. You can't just be an invisible church. Sooner or later people will spot it. But the space that the Church takes up in the world, he says, is the space that it holds and occupies on behalf of everybody. That's to say, the Church is not there to defend its territory. Here's the religious bit, or here's the Christian bit, here's the ethical bit. The Church occupies space so as to say, we will guarantee this for everyone. We will try to keep open here the promise of a solidarity without any advance restriction. And it's in that way, according to Bonhoeffer, that the Church shows what and who Jesus is. For him, the theology of global relationship began with a recognition that in Jesus Christ, God stands in for and stands with any and every human person. That's what the life of Jesus and the death of Jesus are all about. If we are to live with him in his neighbourhood, in his spirit, in his power, that's where we stand, and that's what we seek to realise. So, if Bonhoeffer is right, and if my hearing of Jesus' parable is right, the ethics of global relationship is an ethic that has to do with creating relationship, with the decision, wherever we are, in whatever human situation, to make a bond, to stand with, and as Bonhoeffer says, and it's a challenging phrase, to stand in for, potentially to stand in for the other. That is, to take what's coming to them, to lift their burden on their behalf. Creating relationships which rest upon a recognition that no one of us is who he or she is alone. No one of us exists in a vacuum or as an atom. No one of us comes into being full-grown, self-sufficient. Our human life is constantly receiving who we are from those around us, and in turn giving our life that they may be alive. It may sound very advanced and spiritual and even mystical, but it's the basic fact of our language, our interaction, the gesture with which parent and child communicate. That's where it all begins, as we begin to be who we are, because we are related. And of course, in our human lives, we're related always and already in ways we never chose and never planned. We are embarrassingly bound up with the life of everybody else around us. we'd much rather not be. It would be good if we could trace our pedigree to some independent source, not infected by the embarrassing failures of the human race at large. Just as we'd all like in the church to be independent of the failures of the church at large. But we're bound in already. And when we decide to be a neighbour, when we decide to embark on a style of life that gives life, we're not, in fact, just doing something in a vacuum. We are recognizing and acting out the truth that is deepest in us. When I decide to be a neighbour, when I decide to be the one who gives life, I decide to be what I most deeply am. I recognize and enter into that deep exchange by which human beings constantly make one another human. If Bonhoeffer is right, and if my hearing of Jesus' parable is right, the ethics of global relationship is an ethic that has to do with creating relationship, with the decision, wherever we are, in whatever human situation, to make a bond, to stand with, and as Bonhoeffer says, and it's a challenging phrase, to stand in for, potentially to stand in for the other. That is, to take what's coming to them, to lift their burden on their behalf.
When Mitya, accused of a murder he didn't commit, accepts the guilt for the murder because he feels that he has got to take responsibility for a world in which evil happens, and that utterly generous and sacrificial act of taking the blame is his way of doing something for a world of injustice.
The truth is the excavator ripping up the soil, the white wounds of the clay coming through. That's what we have to face.
The ethics of global relationship is not about constructing a system of universal morality. It's first and foremost recognizing a summons to be life givers, to be to others the surprising strangers who bring them alive. And one of the implications of that is that we must expect to be brought alive by surprising strangers. Global relationship means the willingness to be a surprising stranger and to be surprised by strangers. And in that, to let neighbourliness come alive.
Ladies and gentlemen, now it's time to dance to the beat of Sash.
Mesdames, Messieurs, le disc-jockey Sash est de retour. Après le succès imprévu du titre It's My Life, il dit merci à tous les autres disc-jockeys pour leur coopération fantastique. Un merci particulier à NBG, à Future Breeze et à Jean-Paul. Alors, à votre demande répétée encore une fois.
He's checking what I've got. And then he wants to know my name. He wants a little fun with someone. Mirror on the wall, who's the hottest of them all?
Oye, piensa en tu futuro. No pierdas más tiempo.
¿Por qué?
Porque la vida es corta.
Déjame en paz, déjame solo. Yo vivo hoy, no miro para atrás.
Pero piensa, es muy importante mirar para adelante, para adelante, para adelante, para adelante.
What care I for a goose feather bed? She's turned down so bravely, oh. Tonight I'll sleep by my lover's side, along with the raggle-taggle gypsies, oh.
I don't like if you love me, love me, love me. I'll drive you crazy.
This is why Catholics have the best sex.
Well, maybe there's a God above, but all I've ever learned from love was how to shoot somebody who outdrew you. And it's not a cry that you hear at night. It's not somebody who's seen the light. It's a cold